So everybody, want to start out our second group of final project critiques with McKenna's work. Before we get started, let me just call up her artist statement here. I want to recommend that everyone gives this artist statement a read because I think this is really a perfect example of what an artist statement should look like. I think it's pretty brief. We want to keep our artist statements to, a half a page to a page. We want to very much illustrate our personal connection to the subject matter, which in this case McKenna does that very well. And then, kind of tease it, kind of like, you know, almost invite the viewer to, okay, here's how I feel, here's my perspective on it. Now take that and, incorporate that into your viewing experience of the images here. So with that being said, let's look at the images themselves. Let me pull that crop tool off there. So a couple things that we had talked about in the previous feedback videos with McKenna was that I thought it might be a nice idea to do this body of work in black and white because a lot of sort of the high fashion ads we see in kind of the slick magazines are often done in black and white. So it's very much seen as part of a way of approaching contemporary fashion through photography. So with that being said, we can see she has definitely taken that approach here, and I really love it. I think it works really well, and it just again mirrors the concept of the project, which is an important part of this whole process here. So first image, really great, lots of different handbags and purses that again sort of almost are symbolic for sort of like the different personalities that women are forced, or I don't want to say forced, but are sort of imposed upon by society here. So really wonderful, and love this side lighting here that you've got going on that is sort of emphasizing all of the texture in the bags and so forth. And of course, we've got to have a shot of the medicine cabinet with all of the various accoutrements that are involved in a day's preparation for a woman. One thing here I do want to point out, McKenna, and especially at the introductory level, this is probably not something that you're going to have a high degree of sophistication on. But I want you to look at this image and pay particular attention at how gray it looks. And when we think about really wonderful black and white images, they sort of have a wide spread of tones. So we have some rich dark blacks, we have some medium grays, and then some bright whites. In this photograph, we've definitely got the black blacks and we've got sort of the medium grays, but we don't have any whites. For example, I look at the edge of these different containers, and I'm reasonably certain that if we were to look at these, a lot of these would probably be white. We look at the dental floss packaging and the aspirin packaging and stuff like that. Well, I go to our histogram here on this photograph, and if we look at the histogram, which, just a reminder, it's a map of where your tones lie in a photograph, we see that there actually are almost zero tones in this white area of the photograph. And just watch when I take some of these tones and actually, so I'm grabbing this triangle here and just pushing it over to the left. And as I push it over to the left, look at how it brings out those white tones and gives us a little bit of subtle differentiation between something like this bottle and the edge of the medicine cabinet, which are very slightly different tones in that highlight white tonal range. And you're going to see as I go through your project, there's 3 or 4 images where this technique very much will apply. So again, probably a little bit more sophisticated type of thing. On the introductory level here, I wouldn't necessarily expect you to fully execute a black and white image, especially being able to handle sort of the tonal ranges like that. But nevertheless, it's good to point it out here and show you it moving forward. And then we've got the makeup container here again. And oops, don't want to do that one, do this one. You know, again, look at our histogram here, and we're seeing, wow, there's almost no tones down at that end of the spectrum. And just like that little adjustment kind of brings that in a little bit better on there. And then the shoes again. And I think one of the things that I love about the project and in all of these images, you kind of have sort of different types of elements in each photograph. So in this image, we've got all sorts of different kinds of shoes, from the, you know, really flowery kind of girly girl, I guess we could call them, type of shoes, to more flats that would be sort of like a business type of shoe, to some sandals, and then to some moccasins or boat shoes. So it almost illustrates sort of the diversity of expectations that are put upon a woman and the different personalities that she would have to exhibit, even through her shoes. So again, just a little tweak on the tonal range in there. Again, love this shot, showing sort of the different stages of, I'm presuming that this is you and of your life. And we see in here a little bit of noise or graininess to the photograph, which I also really love because it reminds me of old film type of photography in it, and really high fashion photography of the late 80s, early 90s, when I guess we sort of had that era when models all of a sudden became supermodels, and were more than just people that were in photographs. They became celebrities and a very contemporary part of culture. So that for me works really well because it kind of works along those lines. So again, just a little tweak there, bringing our tones out, and maybe especially bringing out some of what's going on in the shadows here. And then image 6. And it's kind of funny, we look at image 6 and you can almost look at this image in the magazine and notice how we do have that transition of tones going on in there. I almost wonder if this first shot perhaps could be your opening image in the group, as opposed to having it show up as the sixth image. Because again, it for me sort of introduces the whole idea of beauty, fashion, women, personalities, culture, all of that stuff. So perhaps you might consider that. And then the shot that I think inspired this all from your last project last week. Beautiful image, love the lighting, love the shadowing here, love the simplicity, the repetition of shape and form and line and pattern, and all the things that we've talked about in this class. Really, really beautiful job. And then wrapping it up with this. Again, just going in here, holy cow, look at, we've got all of our tones pushed towards the grays and blacks. Whereas we go in and do that, you can just see how that image improves significantly. So it has sort of that pop and that full tonal range from pure whites all the way to pure blacks in there. So McKenna, really great project. Love what you did. I loved how you took the feedback that you got last week and kind of ran with it for your final project and put it all together. That's one of the important things about this class, learning to listen to feedback and refining your work, continually trying to improve it here. So fantastic job on that. I almost wonder if a self-portrait would have been a great way to end this up, and either a self-portrait of you kind of, maybe half with makeup on, half with makeup off, or maybe with no makeup on or with full makeup, but anything just, again, maybe to sort of tie this all up together in one neat package. But nevertheless, great project, awesome job with this, and I think you totally hit the mark with pretty much everything that I was looking for here. So great job, and give yourself a big pat on the back and enjoy the rest of your summer. And next up we have Natasha's work, and as you can see by the title of it, she is going to take on the subject of pesticides in nature and focuses on the harmful effects of pesticides and kind of contrasts that with the wildflowers and the insects and stuff like that that you know have this sort of innate beauty to them, and that we are basically killing off with the pesticides. So make sure you give this a quick read here and check it out. But again, really strong artist statement. Again, kind of the length that I'm looking for, and certainly it does a good job introducing us to the project without fully describing each and every one of these images. So her opening salvo in this group of images is a dead plant that's obviously uh, sort of almost tilted over in sort of a sad, dejected manner. I think about when someone's sad, they kind of hunch their shoulders over, and they're almost looking down at the ground. And we see the same thing with this plant here. Gosh, this is a beautiful shot. I really like the shot a lot. Maybe the one little improvement that I would have done is either sort of move your camera angle around so we didn't have this one plant intersecting behind it, or if that didn't work, then certainly we can go in and try and get rid of it. I'm just going to get rid of it really quickly using the content aware tool. So I'm just highlighting the area and then going under edit, fill, content aware. And content aware basically is going to look at all of the elements outside of the area that we've selected, and it's going to basically insert them or blend in those into the interior of it. So now we have that image without that intersecting plant behind it. And I probably would even take this one step further and do something like, notice my crop, I'm kind of almost aiming for that rule of thirds position in there. And there's my opening shot right there. Much more simplified, much more clean, direct, to the point. Really like this a lot. And again, I think the image that you presented us with was really strong. Certainly does a good job of introducing us to what's going on here. But always trying to push the envelope a little bit farther. And I think this even is much cleaner, much simpler, and much more directly to the point, which we're always looking at. Second image, great shot of sort of a withered up flower that is clearly in the process of dying. I think one of the interesting things here is you do leave us with a little bit of color on the right side of the flower here, and so we can kind of almost see or imagine what the beauty of this plant was before it's kind of taken on sort of this awful, horrific appearance to it. So beautiful job again with that one. And then the insect that is dead here, especially the bees, which as a gardener myself, I think that's something that we really got to worry about. I'm wondering if we maybe think about cropping in on this even a little bit more, something like that, just to tighten up the image just a little bit. But nevertheless, again, really strong shot, and I think it hits the mark absolutely. And then the sign that really tells the story about what's gone on here and why all of these things are dead. I kind of wrestled with this one, and I bet you probably wrestled with it too. Do we put this sign at the beginning of the project to kind of, tell the story right at the beginning, or do we use it as sort of the bridge in the middle that is the transition point going from the dead insects and plants to the very living and vibrant insects and plants? So it's a tough call, and I'm totally comfortable with the way you did it here. I think it works, and I think it really does act as sort of that transition point to the next group of images that are of the very living, thriving, healthy insects and plants. So your macro shots, which by the way, high degree of difficulty in macro images. I think somebody else in the class had mentioned, surprising how difficult macro photography was going to be and some of the issues that they had with it. I think you got to be really tight with it. The stuff up here is probably not as interesting as what's going on right here with the bee and the flowers there. So if it was me again, I'm probably more apt to do something like that in my crop. And another beautiful image here. Love the way that you're using the shallow depth of field. Great job that you're actually able to capture those bees on the edges of flowers. Gosh, every so often I like to fool around and play around with some macro photography. And from my own experiences, I can tell you how difficult and challenging it is to get an image like this. So many kudos to you. Big pats on the back for taking on something that's, really difficult subject matter and really difficult technically to execute, and you pulled it off pretty flawlessly here. And if you guys remember in a previous feedback, I mentioned something to the effect that opposite colors can be really exciting and attractive to the eye. So in this image, we've got a little bit of red, and red actually is one of those colors that is almost like a magnet to the eye. So when we have red in a photograph, even if it's a teeny bit of red, our eye just kind of immediately latches onto it, which in this case it absolutely has done it on this bug that's right there. Love the almost entirely green palette that you have included just this tiny little bug on it in the middle. Another really great shot. And lastly, the shot, same scheme you can see happening here. A little bit of red onto the mostly green background, and it just absolutely jumps off of the page on it. And especially these last three shots actually, we can really see sort of the beauty of these insects, things that, perhaps might be considered something that is bothersome or feel fearful, or, may not necessarily be a beautiful thing. And in the way you've captured them, you've revealed a certain aesthetic beauty to them that is very, very compelling. So great job with this. I think ultimately, despite those little crops and everything, this is a really wonderful project, and something you certainly can be proud of here. So great job on this. And as I've said to others, if I see you on campus or around, make sure you stop by and introduce yourself and say hi. So good job, and we'll see you down the road. And next up, we have Allison's work. And of course, we start out with her artist statement. And just give you a second or two to read that. But kind of just to summarize, in her statement, she talks about, first of all, her family's history. Her dad's a doctor, her mom's a physical therapist, so the human body is something that fascinates her. And then also, she sort of had these dreams or the psychological influence from movie or movies that she watched when she was young. So again, this is something that she's attracted to, and so she's really tried to incorporate both those ideas into her project. A couple quick things I want to point out. Maybe, maybe it's a little bit on the long side, but certainly it does the job. And again, artist statements are pretty flexible, so I can definitely go with that. The other thing here is Allison told me that she really didn't want to name her photographs, that she kind of wanted them to be a little bit vague. So she had toyed with the idea of just calling them Untitled, but actually ended up putting a name to them. I really like the fact that you put a name to them. And the names are still so vague that it leaves the viewer wondering a little bit. And as I said before, anything you can get the viewer to do to either psychologically or physically interact on a deeper level with your images is going to work. So I'd much rather see just vaguely named photographs as opposed to just putting like Untitled in there. Because again, I think more often than not, to me and probably to many people that would be serious photography people in galleries and stuff like that, they would see Untitled on a photograph as being more of a sign of kind of laziness as opposed to, an intentional thing where you want to be very vague and mysterious and whatever else in the thing. So all that to say, I am really glad that you did end up putting a title on these. So all of these images are what we would call constructed images, or that's kind of again a fancy term for you made them up. You basically did a set design here. It's almost a theatrical type of thing, and I love it. I think it's great. And as we go through all of these images, you can see how you've very carefully thought about each and every one of these images, and from the lighting to the positioning of the model, all of these things have just clearly been well thought out and done in a way that indicates that you are very seriously engaged in this final project, which in the end is all I was really looking for out of everybody. I think aesthetics, meaning beauty, is super super subjective. So at the end of the day, I'm not here to judge whether something's beautiful or not. What I'm really here to look at and evaluate everybody on is what your actual involvement in the project was. And for you, Allison, I can really see that you are really deeply involved with this, which is fantastic. So first image here, we've got, again, beautiful lighting, and we've seen a couple projects where the lighting is kind of the star of the show, and in this instance, this is certainly one of the elements that really works for me here. And this long, almost menacing shadow in the background here certainly is one of the things that really adds to this very mysterious, almost psychologically chaotic, fearful type of imagery that you open up your project with. Second image, again, I would say this image out of all the images probably feels to me like the lighting and the style is maybe a little bit out of alignment with the rest of the images. Certainly the way the model here is propped with the mask and her attire in there. But the image is a little bit brighter and seems to have a little bit, more of a punchier kind of thing, where the rest of the images seem to be much darker, much shadowier, much more mysterious. Whereas we can look at this and sort of all the details in here are pretty obvious and pretty clear and noticeable, whereas in a lot of these other images, a lot of the details are kind of hidden in the shadows, and that makes it sort of psychologically thrilling, to me at least. I love this shot, really, lots of darkness, just the light is falling on your sister here, which I'm going to use sister and model uh, back and forth, those two terms meaning basically the same thing. You know, the one thing I love about this image is I really love this reflection in the water here. So what I might do in this photograph is I'd create a new layer, a new adjustment layer. I would change the blending mode to screen, which that blending mode is going to basically blend all of the highlight areas and bring out all the highlights without changing any of the dark areas. So, you know, her skirt and these dark shadow areas in the background don't really get changed. But what I don't like is I love the darker surface of the water. So basically what I'm going to do is invert this layer. So we go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, and that basically puts that layer back to where it was before. But it's still available to us in our layers palette. And if you notice, the layer is in black now. So if I just take a paintbrush, make sure I have white as my foreground color, now I can go in here and just paint on this reflection of your sister there, and notice how now all of a sudden it is much more obvious. And again, I think it just sort of becomes even that much more haunting in the photograph. And if you don't like, you know, I brightened it up a lot. You can kind of play around with this by toggling the opacity in the photograph, and maybe something like that ends up happening there. But in any case, I think I just love that individual reflection in there. I want to bring that out a little bit more. Again, another image where we've got a lot of side lighting that is really dark. A lot of stuff hidden in the shadows. I don't know, is this a barrel in the background or whatever it is. We can just sort of see little textural elements that really work in there. And even, I love the fact that part of her face is hidden here, so we don't know whether, you know, she's living, she's dead, what's going on in this photograph. So again, very mysterious, very working very well from the perspective of all of the light that's taking place in there. I am going to pause this here for a second because, believe it or not, my mouse has run out of power. So I'm going to plug in another mouse here in 1 second. And let me just pause this for a second. Sorry. Okay. Fresh mouse here, and back to this image. So all in all, I mean, just all the things that we talk about, carrying that concept through all of the photographs, which basically means carrying the same lighting, the same style, the same mood, the same feeling. All of those things are present in all of these images. So great job on that. More images. I even love the fact that your lighting has sort of a little bit of a greenish or just sort of off, unpleasant color cast to it. And perhaps one of my favorite images of the group, again, just love how you're using this technique of sort of highlighting just little individual areas of the photographs and using shadowing to reveal and hide little individual tidbits here. So that, you know, the viewer is trying to put all these things together and figure out what's going on, and all the while sort of building up this anxiety and tension and everything else that goes on in the psychological realm here. And then, you know, a little bit more of a graphic image as sort of you proceed through this whole series of things here. The imagery becomes a little bit more graphic, a little bit more frightening, a little bit more ominous and you know, fearful for the viewer. So pretty neat. You know, definitely theatrical. Definitely feels like a horror movie, which certainly was one of the inspirations for you for this project. And then finally our last image here, which I think is such a great closer because we don't know, is the subject of this dead? Are they sleeping? Is you know, what's happening here? Ultimately, you know, it would seem to infer that, you know, something has happened to this person and that they're dead. But it's just because you've given us only this little detail of the hand that's illuminated and the rest of the body is covered up here, you know, it leaves us sort of hanging. There's sort of like that great cliffhanger at the end of, you know, a episode of the Game of Thrones, that we don't know what's happened. Has our heroine perished in this photograph? Has our heroine survived? Or, you know, what's going on? That little bit of mystery, I think, is a great ending for it all. And ultimately, project is just beautiful from start to finish here, giving us a really cool narrative or interesting narrative that, you know, along the way sort of instills the same kind of fear in us that those good old horror movies originally instilled in you. So, wonderful job here. Love the whole project, and certainly look forward to seeing maybe some more of your work down the road. I know you are still at Canisius after the summer here, so hopefully you get a chance to meet you and get a chance to see you keep pushing your art here and doing more or continued interesting things like this, because certainly I think this is a great project. So enjoy the rest of your summer. So next up we have Sarah's images. And one of the interesting things that happened here, Sarah, that actually happened to another student in the class too, your images saved with the appendix after the .jpeg. So the name of the file, Sport Emotions, ended up getting tagged on here after the JPEG rather than before it. And what that does is it confuses our computers because it's looking for that appendix and it can't really find it. It's actually seeing Sport Emotions as part of the appendix. So it's confusing it, and that's why your image is actually coming up as an exec file. The thing that I did here was just delete that appendix, and once I do that, we're going to get a message here that asks me whether I end it, and now your photograph comes up like that. So really the way that this image needed to be labeled was Sport Emotion right after your name there and before the appendix on here so that it reads right. So give me a second here. I'm going to actually pause this and go in and change all of these. I don't want you guys to have to sit here and watch me do each and every one. Okay, so we're back and you can see I've gone in and changed all of these images, just basically erased all of those extra words past the .jpeg. So again, just to restate here, you've got to have the very last words in your file name as .jpg. Not sure why those other names came up in there. Maybe just by accident you didn't see that and started typing after the .jpg. Anyhow, that is all fixed. So let's open these. Oops, that's going to open it up in preview. Sorry about that. Let's pop that in Photoshop. And let's take a look at your artist statement. So in your artist statement, you kind of went ahead and described for us basically what's going on in all of these images. I love the fact that you've got and you've memorized all of these or jotted down all of your exposure settings and stuff like that. But for an artist statement, generally speaking, we wouldn't list that information. You know, again, basically we want to just simply talk about how this project is, about your sister and her visit to you in Buffalo and some of the different things that she's experiencing. You don't really need to go in and give us the explanation or the description on each and every one of these images. For me, it helps me to see this stuff because I can kind of help you through some troubleshooting if there is anything like that in the photographs. But for the just average viewer that would look at your images in a gallery or something like that, that information is almost overkill and really, in some ways, kind of counter to things, because sometimes you do get people that get very focused on the technical end of things, and they lose sight of really sort of the real subject matter, the real evocative aesthetics of the image. So let's take a look at all of your shots here. Let me find the first one. So first shot, locker room shot. Love the fact that you've got this very low vantage point for us. It's clearly down from the ground. And the other thing I like in here is that, it's very much a sort of a slice of reality that clearly the subjects in here aren't really posed. They're not really aware of your presence, or if they are aware of your presence, it's such that it's really doesn't seem to be affecting the ultimate nature of the photograph here. So love that. Love the fact that we've got sort of the sneakers and the bags and everything just randomly strewn around about it. So good introduction to the project, good shot, and especially love the vantage point here. By the way, a few of you guys in some of the earlier images had taken photographs in the locker rooms that the color balance was a little bit funky on them. You can see in this one, Sarah, you did a really wonderful job with your color balance, or what's known as your white balance in there. I think it just really looks good rather than having sort of like this off yellow color to it. So second image, image of, I guess, a time when you guys were eating or having some lunch or having some snacks or something like that. So interesting shot. I think it's a nice filler for the project as a whole. When I look at the rest of the images, I think to myself, maybe this feels a little bit out of character, but I guess in the end, it's one of those little details that's kind of important and interesting. So I certainly can live with it being in there. Shot of your sister at lunch or dinner or wherever you guys were. And I love the fact that you had given me a picture last class of that was kind of a wide shot and everything was in focus, and it just looked like it was taken on an iPhone that virtually anybody could have taken. I'm so happy that you've gone in, you either picked a different exposure or a different frame or refined this a bit. And we can see now that, your sister's in the background, she's smiling, obviously having fun, but you've sort of framed it between these two glasses of water, and it just creates a little bit more of an interesting, aesthetically pleasing shot. So again, great job in taking that feedback and running with it. Another interesting shot here. Love the continued use of that really low down towards the ground vantage point here. You can see it's almost kind of an introspective type of image. A little bit on the dark side, but again, I kind of like that because it sort of adds a little bit of air of mystery about what she's thinking about, or is she just exhausted, worn out, whatever the case. But because of that darkness, it's kind of quiet. There's a little bit of again, introspection in the photograph here that I think is really compelling and really interesting. So I like that shot a little bit. I think you called this image, or did you title it Spent or something like that? Let me just go back here, but I thought you had an interesting title for this photograph. You called it Crushed. So again, at the end of the day, she's completely worn out. I have to laugh because I have a 6 year old that is really into sports, and she plays all these sports, and at the end of the day, uh, she I wish she was crushed, but it seems like she has a never-ending reserve of energy. But I totally get this shot here. Love the shot, love the composition, love how you have sort of this pattern of striped sheets or striped blankets in there, and all of the stripes are kind of finely broken up by just sort of a half profile of her face that's sort of emerging from all of this clutter in the bed. You can really see how she's just sort of like almost being surrounded by all the stuff in the bed as she just kind of collapses to sleep in there. So beautiful shot. Love that one too. And another shot where you're again using that same vantage point, which I love that you're consistently shooting from the same vantage point and giving us different photographs but using the same style and same approach to it. So that's great. I kind of wonder if this image is maybe a little bit dark. Um, I guess I probably would brighten it up just a little bit, something like that. And then the last image here where I love, just like some of the other people in the class have done with the technical aspect of things here. You've gone in and given us a real slow shutter speed, so we have the ball bouncing. You can almost feel like this image is alive, and we can almost hear that ball bouncing off the gym floor as she goes from hand to hand doing it. It's kind of interesting that you chose to cut off her head in here. In one way, it makes it interesting because we wonder more about her. Is she having fun while she's doing this, or is she have a look of pain, and she may have been doing this for a long time and she's exhausted, or whatever the case is here. I think that that's an interesting choice, maybe one that works really well. On the other hand, it is about your sister. We've seen her facial expression in some of the other shots, so maybe in the end here, she's really having fun doing this, and we see her with the big smile on her face, despite all of the hard work and all of the energy that she has spent doing this. She's still enjoying it and still having fun. So, tough call on this end one, but ultimately the choice is yours, and I think in the end, the project really resonates very well. So, great job with this. I think everything looks great, and ultimately you've put together a really solid project that certainly is very cohesive and certainly reveals a very distinct, unique narrative to the viewer. So with that, I'm going to wish you good luck on the upcoming season, and look forward to seeing some of your games as we get into the fall here.